Monday, February 13th. We're talking about the Great Depression, mostly a tiny bit about Adolf Hitler's rise. Go ahead and have your note cards ready. You're allowed to use them for your quiz. Everybody is, no matter what your grade level. And I recommend that you have them at least into 2 stacks with the 2 chapters split, because I'm not trying to confuse you on the quiz. The formatting is different, but you need to, it's sort of in order. The questions are sort of in order. All right, briefly on the homework, lesson 56 in note cards. This is about the Holocaust. What book are you reading right now that is Holocaust related? Yes. So this is the history background of the hiding place. We will also have another chapter that will point out about the biographies of 4 people, of which Corrie ten Boom will be one of them. But for this lesson, it's more of the overview, the historical overview of the Holocaust. Don't forget to work on your 20th Century Presidents project. If you haven't started, you are disastrously behind. So let me just remind you that you are given a month or more for projects for a reason.
Wait,
there's nothing to ask about that.
So we should have.
Or you could be studying your Middle East map, which is a game on Google Classroom. We will go over that a couple of times today. This is the homework. Does anybody have questions on the homework? Yes, Ben?
When is the 20th century?
Next Monday. Any other questions? You have a syllabus. Double check your syllabus. Double check your syllabus. Okay. Let's go on. I am going to start today with a little bit of Black history, a person you probably don't know and you should. His name is Lemuel Haynes. I want you in your brain to drop him into Revolutionary War. That's the era we're talking about. He did fight in the Revolutionary War. He was a Minuteman, like many of the Americans during that time. What stands out about him is that he was the first Black pastor ordained in America. He had a Black father, a white mother, and he was ordained as a pastor in Vermont. That was the state that had the first Black pastor. He pastored an all-white church for 30 years in Vermont. And what's interesting about it, he was also not, he regularly talked about anti-slavery stuff. He was an abolitionist. He wasn't just the first Black pastor and an abolitionist and a Revolutionary War Minuteman. He also was a Puritan. His influences were like Jonathan Edwards, if you can think that. So just sort of pile it all together, and he really blows your circuits for the profile that he fits. And I think it makes him a really interesting and really admirable character to know. Lemuel Haynes. What we're going to use for our opening for our prayer time is the words that he wrote himself to go on his tombstone. You guys want to write your own tombstone words? Would that be fun, Brody? Yeah? So he wrote these words to go on his tombstone, and I'm going to read them to you, and then we'll pray. There's his tombstone, his and his wife's there on the left, and he wrote these words. Here lies the dust of a poor, hell-deserving sinner who ventured into eternity trusting wholly on the merits of Christ for salvation. In the full belief of the great doctrines he preached while on earth, he invites his children and all who read this to trust their eternal interest on the same foundation. So, Lemuel Haynes has invited us to trust on the same foundation that he did while he was alive, preaching in Vermont in the Revolutionary War era. Let's pray. Lord, we are thankful for so many interesting people that we learn about in history. Lemuel Haynes is one of these, a man who is an example of somebody who remained faithful to the doctrines of grace, to the gospel, to justice, and preaching against slavery. He was a patriot, and he was a faithful Christian to the end. And we thank you for his example. We pray, Lord, that we could learn from the best of the examples of the people that we study, and also learn from the terrible people we study, and in our heart commit to not imitating their patterns. I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. I need 2 people to practice the map game. It is not required for you to actually know a lot about it, because I would prefer to talk you through it, because I think that's actually better for everybody to do that. All right, Blythe, number 1, Liam, number 2.
I haven't done
It's fine. We have lots of time.
it.
No. Blythe, I want you to do it first. All right, come on up here. And what we're going to do when we go through this is I'm going to talk you through how to think about the Middle East map and remind you of some of the things. Okay. Yemen, Oman, Y-O, right. Syria is near Israel. It's up a little bit further north than that. Good. It's larger. You know the Mediterranean Sea?
Is it this one?
Near Italy? Near Italy? That was it.
Okay, sorry.
All right. Jordan is just next to Israel. Just by Israel.
I don't know where any of these
Do you know
things
where
are.
Israel is?
No.
Look, turn around and look at my dot on the map. That's Israel.
Okay.
So Jordan is just next to it.
Okay.
Egypt in Africa? Egypt,
I have no idea
no,
where
Egypt
any
is
of
over
this.
in Africa. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
All right, so of all the stands, Turkmenistan, well, you got it. Pakistan is right next to India. Bahrain is an island in the Persian Gulf.
Left, right.
Look right here. This
Oh.
is the Persian Gulf.
Okay.
So Bahrain is an island,
Oh.
but that
This
was
one?
the water itself. This one's the island, yes. The Red Sea is next to Egypt. Cyprus is an island in the Mediterranean
It's
Sea.
the one you just worked on.
Oh.
Cyprus is an island. No. Island in the Mediterranean. Good. So Iraq, Iran. Qatar. Qatar is in the Persian Gulf also, right next to that island.
This
So
one?
it pokes up like a finger almost.
Past tense, Iran.
Qatar, right here.
Okay.
Past tense.
Lebanon is just above Israel. It touches the Mediterranean Sea. The UAE is a V-shaped country. It's near Qatar. It's on the Persian Gulf.
Very rich. Their policemen
This.
Yes.
have
Good.
Lamborghinis.
Iraq before Iran.
I have no idea.
Uzbekistan. Oh, that is one of the stands. Uzbekistan is the furthest north. Yemen, Y-O, Yo, down the Arabian Peninsula.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Caspian Sea is yes. Saudi Arabia is the largest country on the Arabian Peninsula. Israel,
Israel.
Mediterranean Sea.
Oh,
Mediterranean Sea,
darn it.
tiny.
I have no idea where any of these are.
The Persian Gulf is what you tried to click on when we were doing that. Yep. The Arabian Sea is large and it's near India.
This one.
Tajikistan is a funny shaped one.
This one.
That one.
Yes. Turkey is in Europe.
Tastes good.
Afghanistan is next to Pakistan. Good.
Oh, that was.
Nicely done. All right, come on, Liam. All right, let's talk through it one more time. Click on Israel. Liam, Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. The UAE. Qatar, right next to it.
Yes.
No, yeah, that one. Pakistan by India. Yes.
Yeah.
Uzbekistan. Good. Syria is there. Good. Saudi Arabia, the largest one on the Arabian Peninsula. The Red Sea. Yemen. White. Yo comes first.
Right.
Oman. Lebanon is just above Israel. Tajikistan. Funny shape. Turkmenistan. Afghanistan is the stands. All the stands are together. Turkey is in Europe. Jordan. That was it.
Yeah.
Iraq before Iran. Good. Persian Gulf is water right next to that.
Wait. Oh wait.
Persian Gulf.
Oh, here.
Yep.
Nice.
Caspian Sea. Mediterranean. Cyprus is in the Mediterranean. Egypt. Arabian Sea, it's big. Bahrain's an island. Iraq before Iran. Good job, Liam. Good job. Okay. All right, guys, will you turn the lights on, please? I'm going to hand out a handout to you. Shh. All right. Listen to me while I'm doing this. I know that you have another project going on right now, and this is an overlap because this one is not due for another month. This particular one is going to help us as we study World War II. We are going to memorize and recite a portion of one of Winston Churchill's speeches. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister in Great Britain during World War II. Shh. Listen. He was the Prime Minister in Great Britain during World War II. During the time when Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister, Great Britain was standing on the potential verge of extinction. Why? Well, because Hitler, with his lightning warfare, had taken over nearly every power in Europe so quickly that it seemed like he almost left countries indefensible. It seemed overwhelming to people to imagine being able to stand up to Hitler. And America was not yet in the war. So, Great Britain was the only power that stood between Hitler and all of Europe falling into the darkness under Hitler's, kind of reign and rule. Hitler was about to invade Great Britain when Winston Churchill, as Prime Minister, did a series of different things, basically speeches, that allowed him to rally the British people to fight and to stand and to do it in ways that would stand out to the rest of the world and eventually gain the support of America. America was not in the war at this point, so that's a big deal. This is one of Winston Churchill's many famous speeches, just a portion of it. And we're going to memorize this because it gives you a sample of the ways that Winston Churchill's speeches and talking stirred the nation to be able to stand to their own defense and to fight against Hitler in the darkness that he brought. So, the point of today is for you to understand what I'm reading. Please follow along either by looking at the sheet I gave you or by looking at the board. Follow along, and I want you to just basically work at understanding today. We will go over this in class. I will help you with the memory work, and I don't think it should take tons of work outside of class if you work on it in class. So look at the words, please, in front of you or on the board. I'm going to read these to you. We're going to read it twice. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and the oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and liberation of the old. Let me explain a little bit about that ending part. The new world is North America. The old world is Europe. That's just terminology that people used back then. So, at the time that Winston Churchill was saying this, he intended for Britons to stay in Britain and fight. But he was already moving the government of England, starting to move it over to Canada. You guys know how Canada is a British province?
He was moving important stuff so that if
Yes.
they were invaded, they wouldn't get them.
Exactly. He was just getting ready. They were being invaded, but if Britain lost, they would just have moved their government over to Canada and kept fighting. So part of what he's trying to inspire the British people is that we're not giving up. No matter what, we're not just going to give up to Hitler like it looks like France has done, or like what's happened in Poland, or like what happened in Austria. We're not doing that. We're going to fight against Hitler, no matter what. There's no giving in to this tyrant. So Winston Churchill's speech, when he talks about that, is one of we'll talk more about him in the future, but he was an absolute inspiration to the British people during this time. As in his personal life, he was a bit of a mess. He was, I think, an alcoholic. He had all sorts of things going on, but he was the man for the moment in British history to stand against Hitler and what was happening in there. So let's read it one more time, and hopefully this will all make even more sense this next time.
Together?
No. I'm just going to read it to you one more time. So again, read it for the sake of understanding. I want you to catch the understanding of the words. You'll recite better if you understand things. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. In an interesting twist of, we might say, prophetic imagination, it was actually the New World. It was United States of America joining in with the Allies that did finally, sort of with all of America's power and might, did finally help the rescue and the liberation of Europe from Hitler. So even though he was really talking about Canada, his words were true in terms of what happened in World War II. All right, we'll go over this from now on as you're learning it, but right now it's time for a reading quiz. So put that paper in a safe place in your notebook. Yes.
After you do the reading quiz, can you put the note cards up on
Nope,
the screen?
because I've got something else for you. So what's going to happen is this. I'm going to give you the reading quiz, and this is the same for people who are at home listening to this. I'm going to give you the reading quiz. The reading quiz is not multiple choice. It has blanks in it. They do not require complete sentences. They will require a word or a phrase. You're allowed to use your note cards. When you finish, there will be upside down on your desk another thing that is notes about the stock market from this chapter. I want you, if you finish, and I take your quiz up, I want you to flip this over and try your best to see how many of these you know. This is not a quiz. This is just, I want you to read through it and see if you know them. And then we will fill in the rest of them and you can check it. I recommend that you do this one in pencil, however, because you might need to correct them since you're doing it out of your head. It is time for a quick quiz. As soon as you get the quiz, you may begin. And again, raise your hand. I'll pick up your quiz and you can work on this. Same thing for those of you at home. While the video is running, you take the quiz first that I sent to your parent. And then while you're waiting for us to move on, you should be trying to fill in the economics and Great Depression worksheet to the best of your ability. Don't forget to write your name. I didn't put a name blank on this, but I do need a name on it. You're not allowed to use your neighbors, note cards, or siblings. Only your own. think I have all the quizzes, so we can move on. So you are going to, oh, I forgot to tell you this part. I haven't had every student take the test yet, so I'm not giving you back your test till Wednesday. However, grades are online, so you can see what you made. Okay, so we're going to talk about the stock markets. But before we do, I have a question. Do any of you know that your parents invest in the stock market, or do you personally invest in the stock market? And if you're going to tell me about it, think about this question too. Do you know if you invest in something that's a fund, like a mutual fund, where it's a bunch of different companies together, or could you tell me, is there something very specific that you invested in? So that's my question. Raise your hand if you want to share. Yes.
My grandpa, instead of giving us just money where he'll invest money for us in stocks.
Mm-hmm.
And recently he invested in this one company. Forgot what it is, but it's been doing very well.
Well, there you go. Yes.
My dad, when he was really young, got like a few Bitcoin.
Okay.
And he said that was the greatest mistake of his career. I don't know.
Mistake?
I think he said greatest mistake. But I think he said it's a really big mistake.
Oh, to not have bought more?
No, to sell it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. We'll come back to that. Madeline?
My dad, he stocks.
Does he ever tell you anything about them?
Well, he said that he wish he had bought more Teslas.
Well, there you go. That's sort of the same as his dad's Bitcoin thing. Yes.
My mom and dad do stocks, and they watch person and then see off and try and decide, looking at
So
graphs.
they do their own investment. They don't have somebody else do the investment for them. They figure it out themselves. That's admirable too. Yes, Trey.
Not quite sure which one, but my dad has invested in stocks, and that went pretty well. But right as me and my sister
Mm-hmm.
started investing, I think she invested in 3 different ones. I don't know what they were, and I invested in 2.
Do you know what you
And
invested in?
No, I think we were choosing between 2, and then my dad, I don't know which one he chose. But, and then right as we did it, the war with Ukraine started. And
Okay.
the stocks started.
But if you're patient,
Yeah.
it'll
It
probably
takes a
all
while.
bounce up. Nope, not taking any more. All right, so nope. So, do any of you know someone whose job is to do investments for other people? Somebody who manages investments. Yes.
Financial.
Yes. Yeah. Do you you don't have to tell me who it is, but does anybody know financial advisors, or are you related to a financial advisor? You guys do? Okay. So a financial advisor is the person who thinks about and makes those decisions for somebody else, as opposed to what Blythe was saying, that her parents think about and make the decisions for themselves. Obviously, you can make on the exact same thing. If all things were even, you can make more if you do your own investments, because you don't have to pay somebody else to do it. But it takes a lot of careful attention to watching this all the time, which is why most people have somebody whose professional all the time job is to watch out, do the research, figure this stuff out, and most people do that. And also most people spread out their investments. If your parents encourage you to invest in a stock, then they're basically trying to teach you something. They're trying to teach you how stocks work. But most people who are investing larger amounts of money don't invest in one thing because of what we're about to talk about. All right, so when people invest in buying, selling, and trading, what they're doing is buying, selling, and trading debt. Isn't that an interesting thing to think about? It is not just, I don't know what we think of investments, but it is debt. The companies need money in order to run their company. They got to get it from somewhere, not just from people buying Teslas or people buying McDonald's sandwiches. They get it from people who make general investments without getting anything back. People who aren't getting a car in return, or they aren't getting a Big Mac. Instead, people are getting stock. They're becoming partial owners in the company when they invest in the company, They're letting the company use the money that they give them with the hope and the idea that the company is going to do well enough to make money instead of losing money. What is the...
I don't understand. How do you get money back?
Okay, well, let me get to that. Let me start by here. This is the actual, one of the physical stock exchanges. This is in New York City. It's the New York Stock Exchange. It is an actual building with a room where lots of people walk around and not just look at screens, but actually physically buy and sell stock. So this is a real thing. It happens in New York. It happens in Tokyo, Japan. There are places around the world where stocks are physically bought and sold. There's also virtual stock markets. This is people sitting at home or in an office on a computer screen, watching numbers, doing research, and then actually buying and selling without ever walking into a physical stock market.
Wait, are those some of the lights too?
We're about to get to the lights. All right. An example of the physical stock market is the New York Stock Exchange. This top one is the New York Stock Exchange. It is in New York. That's one of the examples. It's not the only one in the world. Virtual internet stock market, it's the NASDAQ. Now, most people call the top one the New York Stock Exchange, but nobody calls the NASDAQ by its long name, whatever NASDAQ stands for. I don't know what it is. You can Google it, but people just call it the NASDAQ. Buying stock is the same as investing money in a business, like I had told you before. When you buy stock, there is science to it, and there's also risk. So it's partly a gamble, and partly there's actual science that's involved.
If I said gain and loss, would that also kind of be the same thing?
Well, that's on the next page. There's something about this. Write science and risk, because I want you to, well, the next page for this, the bottom ones. So there's a science to it. People whose jobs are to be investors, investing other people's money, they have a lot of people who do a lot of research, market research, to think about what's a better or a worse investment. They might market research and say, okay, is Apple run by a really good person? Do they have a good plan for how many phones and devices they're going to release this year? Does it seem like the vibe that people are going to keep buying them? All right, I think that Apple remains a good investment. And then they sort of have formulas that they use to figure out what's a good or what's a bad investment. Venture capitalists are people who do all of that but are just investing in brand new ideas that have not been proven. That is super risky. Venture capitalists would be like when your dad bought Bitcoin when it wasn't anything. Like, he was like taking a risk of completely losing his money, but that's why he only bought a little bit. And had he bought more, now after the fact he says, oh, if I'd only bought more. But he didn't know that at the time. Yes, make it fast.
It was like a few cents at the time. It was maybe like
Yeah.
$1. So
Yeah.
It wasn't
And well, let me get to that in just a minute about the other part of it. Stock brokers are people who study the market and recommend good investments. So the people that you know that are financial aid advisors, that's the kind of people they're working with. There are always cheaters in the system. Cheaters in the system make the system they can make the system really volatile. Cheaters in the system are, did anybody in this room say a stock, what's a stock that you've invested in that I'm familiar with? Did anybody have a name of a company?
I know I have something in Apple.
You have something in Apple?
I know a random one. It's
Uh-huh.
called Urgent.
Okay, what is it? What kind of company is it?
I have no idea. I just know the name.
You
My
knew,
sister-
you picked.
I
What
don't
did your
remember
sister
what
pick?
one. I think there's a few things. One of them was Spider.
Okay, Spider is what kind of company?
No idea. Probably makes it up.
Isn't it?
All right, let's just stick with Apple because we all know Apple. All right, so, so if you invested in Apple, it's because you generally believe like this is a solid, good product. It's going to keep increasing in value and all of that. A person who's trying to cheat the system is just trying to sort of short the system. They're not interested in any particular stock. They're just interested in like buy, sell, but like how can I sort of try to get like a little bit out, drop it, buy it, drop it. Like it just creates a little bit more volatility. Generally, that's not how most people do it. And no, put your hand down for right now. Stocks can definitely be overpriced. And I think the great thing to sort of pick as an example here, because this is the example that keeps coming up every time, is to think about a stock like Tesla. Okay, so let me flip to the next thing. Oh, no, I'm not going to flip to the next thing yet. So when you think about a company like Tesla, when Tesla was first introduced as a company, it's like electric vehicles are the future. It's a brand new kind of idea to do it on a grand scale. Some people think, yeah, that's great. Some people are like, whatever, there's no future. People invested in it at the beginning, some because they were environmentalists. We care about the environment. Some because they're like, oh, this idea is going to take off. So people invested in this idea, and Tesla started growing as a company. Now, at a certain point, you have to wonder, is Tesla priced at the right place, or is it overpriced? What would create it being overpriced is if, like, actually, secretly, the company is hiding from us the fact that all of their self-driving cars are running into walls. Okay, then the stock would be overpriced because once the public finds out about that, people are going to pull their money out and not want to invest in a company if they can't actually create good cars. But if it's actually a stable company, well, then there's a future there, and it might not be overpriced at all. So part of this is thinking about the future of the company, which takes us to this next thing. The place in New York City where stock market is located is Wall Street. Wall Street is an actual street. Wall Street's not some like place in movies. Wall Street is, you can stand on the corner of Wall Street and any other place, and it's a street sign. And the only reason why we think of Wall Street as a financial district is because there is a building there called the Stock Exchange, and it's on Wall Street. Typically with stocks, you want to buy low, sell high, and I'm going to pull Soren's example in here. Soren's dad bought Bitcoin when it was very, very cheap. He bought it low, okay? Did Bitcoin, now everyone's heard of it, did you think Bitcoin increased in value? So Bitcoin increased a lot in value, not at first, but after a while it started increasing in value. Now, there was a point, watch my hands for this, there was a point when the value got so high that Soren's dad looked at it and said, I have made so much money, but I don't have confidence that it's going to keep growing. It might be overpriced at this point. I'm going to sell it. And when I sell it, I get to make all this money, and it's real money. He gets to make all that money, take that money, and do whatever he wants to with the money. Put your hand up. Whatever he wants to. I can put it in another investment. I can buy a house. I can do anything I want with this money. But the guesswork is that you want to buy low, sell high. What if the cost or the price of Bitcoin kept going up, which it did? At that point, Soren's father would say, oh, I wish I had kept it and not sold it, because look, I could have made so much more money if I waited to sell it. But at a certain point, you might hold on to an investment, and it might do this. I should do the chart this way. It might start going down in value. And then it doesn't matter if you've held on to it. If you sell when it drops in value, you still only make whatever the value is right then. The way to make the most money off of stocks is to sell when it's at the highest point. And you don't know when that is. There's risk involved. There's a gamble involved. You don't know when exactly it's the highest thing, which is why if you can, like Trey, afford to just wait it out, the war in Ukraine isn't going to matter as much, because probably the markets will stabilize and eventually your stock will start growing in value again. But buy low, sell high, that's the goal of investments. when the stock market crashed in 1929, people who had invested in the stock market started selling. It's like the stocks had gone like this, and then they crashed, and people started selling when the stocks were low. They were losing money, but they were sure that they were going to keep losing more money, and eventually they'd be worth nothing. So when the stock market crashed, the idea was, I'm going to sell low before it goes any lower. Everybody did that at the same time. When everybody does that at the same time, it creates a crash, which in our country lasted for 3 years. Now, you would think, okay, so this only affects rich people who have money in the stock market, which is not all of America at all. But that's not true, because the effects were felt throughout all of society. But there are also a lot of things that happened at the same time that all had an effect on the Great Depression. One of them was farming. With farming, when we talk about farming today, there aren't very many people in America who farm. Back in those days, 20%, 1/5 of Americans were farmers. So what happened to the farmers happened to a lot of people. Today, only 2% of America is farmers. So the stuff we're going to talk about with the farming affected this huge portion of America. And also, banks started failing because the United States government did not back up the banks. You guys remember It's a Wonderful Life? Remember the run on the bank? Where he's like, collect all my money, all right, we're just going to pay what... Everybody was trying to take their money out of the banks. Today, the United States government won't let the banks fail. You'll sometimes hear it on the radio. They're FDIC insured. That means the government's backing up the banks to prevent this from ever happening again. Stocks are not backed up, but banks are. So what happened in the Great Depression is that people they didn't have money, so they stopped paying their mortgages. Mortgages are like the rent you pay when you actually own something, own a house. They stopped paying their mortgages. When they stopped paying their mortgages, the banks took their houses or took their farms, and then there's no farms for them, no farmers. So there's a downward spiral that happened. Yes? Yeah. There's a lot of pictures and videos from this era of history because it's very well documented. This is a newspaper from the Wall Street market crash. What had happened, like I said, is that the market had been going up so crazy high. People were making so much money, but when it crashed, when people started taking out their money, and there was this drop, that drop happened in a matter of days. And and then it ended up, and it kept dropping. For 3 years, it got lower and lower. So really, if you had a stock investment, it stayed, like value was nothing for a really long time.
Why is it January
1935, 1931, 1933, 1935. This is from 1925 to 1955.
In 55, it got really...
Well, it just got back up to the level it was at in 29.
Well, right
If I were to show you our stock market now, it's so much higher than this, it wouldn't even be comparable. Okay, the date, you're supposed to, yes, Liam?
I was gonna ask, why did it go down?
People sold. They sold without buying. Everybody sold, nobody bought anything. And then the prices just dropped because nobody's picking them up and buying them. Everybody wants to sell, nobody wants to buy. The date itself is important, the whole date, because the stock market crash did not happen in a year, it happened on a day. And it happened very fast on a day. So that's why the date of October 29th, 1929 is something that we learn. I'm going to have to go pretty fast through this. I'm going to be posting this one on Google Classroom for you. All right, let's talk about farming. The new farming technology, you would think, this is a great thing. We've got all these new ways to make crops. The new crops are like all these cool steam engines and tractors and ways to plow the fields. We're gonna grow so much corn. But let me ask you a question. You know that there's a time of year when your mother says to you, hey, it's apple season. So we can buy a lot of apples right now because what? There's a ton of apples because it's apple season, and what happens to the prices? The prices drop. The prices are a lot cheaper. So when they're in season, it drops because there's just so many of them.
How do we get apples out of season? Just from, like,
The people grow them, other places, other parts of the world. Imported. Okay. What happened with all the new technology, and this was just terrible timing, Industrial Revolution, terrible timing, is that all of these farmers were able to grow so much of their crop that, let's say, normally they would sell, please stop it, Matt. Normally they would sell an ear of corn for 30 cents. And they had so much, they're like, okay, it's like being in season. We'll sell it for 20. Oh wait, no, it's fine because there's so much. We'll sell it for 15. Or we'll sell it for 10. Okay, we'll sell our ears of corn for 5 cents. Oh wait, no one will even pay a penny for an ear of corn because there's just so much of it, they practically have to give it away. It was during this era that farmers even burned their crops because otherwise they would sit in barns and in the fields and rot. They had to just destroy their crops even though America was going through a depression and people were starving everywhere. There were no systems to get the food to the people who needed the food. And then the farmers kept losing their farms because they couldn't pay their mortgages because they didn't have money. Nobody was buying their stuff. And then they stopped farming. The government had to respond too. The government responded to the Depression by charging high costs to other countries in order to get American goods. This would be a great idea Smoot and Hawley had, except it didn't work because the other countries just stopped buying our stuff. So the tariff idea was a failure of a policy. Another policy idea was to take our country off the gold standard. Have you heard of the gold standard before? Gold standard means every paper dollar has a dollar somewhere in a vault that backs it up. Like our paper money has value. When we took ourselves off the gold standard, then those paper dollars no longer had anything backing them up. The government could just print money. It changes the value of the money. This happened in Japan, this happened in America, and it did, in the short term, it helped. But in the long term, it caused a lot of problems. The other government policy that we had with other countries was this sort of circular thing where, do you remember that Europe was utterly destroyed in World War I, right? Like all their buildings and cities and all of that. They needed to rebuild, so they borrowed money from us because we were the rich country who didn't get messed up during World War I. So they borrowed money from us. They were rich enough, so they paid us back. So we took the money and we lent it to Germany. Germany, which, as you know, was completely devastated in World War I because of what? What was asked of them? The Treaty of Versailles that demanded that they pay a lot of reparations. And when our money systems failed, it threw us into a depression, but it threw Germany into a worse depression. Herbert Hoover was the president at the start of the Great Depression. And did you guys know the play Annie is actually from the Great Depression? All of these people used to be wealthy.
Today we're living in a shanty.
And they've lost everything.
Today we're scrounging for a meal. Dancing in coal for fires. Who knew I could steal?
These are the effect of the Depression.
I used to winter in the tropics. I spent my summers at the shore. I used to throw away the papers. He don't take
And who did they blame?
We like to think you're Herbert
The president for his policies. That is this play. Now, like I told you, farmers had destroyed their crops. Do not pack up, listen to me. Everybody still. If this weren't all bad enough, there was a disastrous drought that happened in the Midwest. All these people are leaving the urban east, heading west, looking for jobs, and this is what it looked like. Think of like the worst Western movie you've ever seen with the wind swirling around. It was like that, except things were just buried in the dirt. No rain, no crops, no food, nothing. Disaster in the Midwest. Not related to the Great Depression, it just made it so much worse. People are waiting for food, for charity. People didn't have jobs. People couldn't take care of their children. And into this walks FDR, the next president, who says, I have a plan. It's to make a new deal with America. And my new deal is that the government is not just going to print money. The government is going to make up jobs. The government's going to go create park systems, create railroads, build dams. The government's just going to go do things to make America better. And when it does it, yeah, of course we're falling into, we're going to owe money, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to print money, we're going to pay people, and they're going to have a job. This was the TVA, the WPA, all of these things. Guys, please be still and let me finish. This partly helped to bring America out of the Depression. The other thing that helped bring America out of the Depression was World War II. Because in World War II, if you think about it, now people are going off to war, and there was a need for jobs, a bunch of factories, a bunch of like things that needed to be done. This whole way of thinking is John Maynard Keynes' theory that unemployment is the problem, so we've got to create jobs. The Depression, like I had said, was bad in America, but it ripple affected all throughout the world, especially Japan and Germany, two countries that we would end up fighting in World War II. All right, the last thing I want to tell you is that as bad as the Depression was for white Americans, it was way worse for minority Americans, because the few jobs that did exist went to white Americans, and people who were minorities had very little chance of getting it, and their unemployment rates were double or triple that of white people. I'm going to pause, and I want to finish with this. The second chapter you read about Adolf Hitler tells us, which you've read, you've caught the story. The main gist is that Adolf Hitler was a loser who had no future. And he figured out how to basically gain power. He had no friends, no future. How to gain power by burning down a building, putting himself in a position, and rallying people to a cause because of how devastated Germany was. The chapter you read is just the preliminary to understanding World War II, and we will get back to Hitler in a later lesson.
Also, the only class he liked was